Hello, and welcome back to IASA's Virtual Leadership Series. I'm Darin Reffitt, the VP of e-learning with Guidewire Software, and I'm here with Kerry Crockett, the Executive Director of the IASA, and Cathy Ellwood, the President and Founder of Ellwood Enterprises. And today we're going to be talking about culture, managing workplace dynamics in the age of COVID-19. So let's jump right in and let's start with what culture means and how the current situation is changing our culture. Cathy, why don't we start with you?
Okay, so I do think it's important to set the context of culture and what it is. And the way I like to define it, it's really the personality of the company, right? It's the values, the guiding behaviors, it's how we get things done. And within the company, it's the written and the unwritten rules. And really, it's more importantly, it's the unwritten rules. It's the attitudes, the beliefs, and quite candidly, the traditions that are embedded within the organization. And so, what we're seeing then with the pandemic is that the way we get things done in this work from home environment, a lot's changing. What used to matter, in terms of the way we got things done, no longer matters anymore. We're having to throw things out and rethink everything that we used to do and start asking ourselves, does this make sense now? Are we able to do it that old way? There's nobody to talk to when we, are having to make decisions on our own, or the way we talk to people is entirely different than it was in the past. So we're figuring it out, but we're figuring out on the fly. There's a lot that's going to be different in this new normal. And that's what this session is going to be about today.
Yeah, it's definitely the unwritten rules more than the written. If learning workplace culture were as easy as sitting down and opening up that book you get when you start a new job, things would be so much easier. But it's all those things you don't know, all those unwritten rules that really get to you. I always think of workplace culture almost like branding. Working in marketing, we always talk about how you have to live your brand every day. And if you're a company like McDonald's, when you try and rebrand yourself as a healthy option, or if you're Walmart and you try and suddenly rebrand yourself as high fashion, that gets rejected because you're not living that value. Your buyers will not accept that that's part of who you are, right? And so I think culture is a lot the same way. You can put anything you want down on a piece of paper, but if you're not experiencing that as an employee, it's not really part of your culture. So let's talk a little more about what things should leaders be thinking of right now as it relates to culture and how COVID-19 is really impacting us, Kerry.
Sure. I think, one thing to think about is, when we are in our regular workplace and we're surrounded by the rest of our team and our, all the way up from the highest boss down to the different levels that are within your company. Are we still able to align what we're doing now with the company's missions? Are we still aligned with our purpose and our mission as we're moving forward in this new normal? And I think it's one thing that we need to be considering, because as we have shifted from the traditional workplace into remote working, sometimes there may be areas where our mission and our purpose sort of gets a little bit confused. And so it's making sure that the decisions that we're making as it relates to our team and the work that we're doing are still in alignment with the company's purpose and the company's mission. I think you really have to be thinking about how we're able to deliver on our principles and our values when our team is remote, because that has changed as well. Sort of making sure that we are taking into account how we are delivering our message to our team, and that we're still making sure that the values that we hold true as individuals and as a company are still being able to be sort of transferred to our teams, and making sure that they still are in alignment with that as well. It's critical.
Absolutely. I had an experience once where I worked for a company that was very passionate about its culture and values, and they brought in a new boss over top of one of the groups who did not live those values at all. And it was amazing to me how quickly our work group's culture changed, how much our dynamic changed. And sadly, because he was actually moving the needle, how much senior management didn't care that he was breaking our values because he was getting things done. So I've seen that happen, and I imagine that could happen really easily right now in light of what's going on with so much drastic change so quickly.
It's an excellent point. I mean, it's amazing how quickly culture can change. It can change with the change of a new individual. It can change with a change in situation as it relates to a new project that might be coming on, and stress that's added to that as far as deadlines and timelines. So I think as leaders, it's really important that we make sure that we are keeping our pulse on that, and that we are managing through those processes and changes with our teams. We want to make sure too that we're addressing our team's emotional needs, and making sure that we are still reaching out and we're getting our teams to look out for each other, and making sure that you allow your teams to look out for you as well. I think it's one of the areas that as leaders, sometimes we tend to be sort of stoic and we sort of say we can handle it. We have to be there for our teams. We have to make sure that we are not seen as sort of falling down on the job in that area. And I think it's okay that we allow our teams to look out for us as well, and to be open to that, because we're all human at the end of the day. And I think we all need to support each other. And so it's really critical that we allow that to happen. And then how are those relationships changing? It's a new dynamic that we have are finding ourselves in right now in this new normal. And so are the relationships between your team, your teammates, and then yourself and your teams, is that changing? And how you can learn to be more supportive with each other is going to be important.
As someone who joined a new company and a new team a week before we went into the remote world, I'm going to be really interested in seeing what happens with the dynamic when we go back to, or if we go back to what it used to be, because I'm sure there was workplace dynamics in play that I haven't even seen because of joining right as this all went down. Cathy, are there any other areas we need to be thinking about culture and its impact on our teams?
Well, I think probably one of the most important things is that we need to make sure that the decisions and the actions that we're taking right now we're demonstrating that we're building trust with our teams and with our stakeholders. And it's critical that the actions that you're taking are reinforced with behaviors. For example, we're doing everything that we can to work from home, right? We have to. We have no choice. But are we actually reinforcing that with readjusting our work priorities? Are we rebalancing the workloads? Are we, readjusting target dates? Are we taking away unnecessary work that maybe people have that no longer need to be done? Another thing that I think is absolutely critical is, and we've talked about this in other sessions, but I think that we need to realize that we're all going to need to change. And in order to do that, we're going to need to be as transparent as possible. We're going to need to over communicate. We're going to need to make sure that people understand that there are some decisions that are going to need to be made. We'll share with them what we can, and we're going to tell them when we can't. The one thing I think that we also need to do is to eliminate non-value added work. Eliminate work that is, maybe we as leaders like to have that report that, was interesting, but not necessarily impactful. Focus on the work that matters. Get rid of stuff that, isn't critical to the bottom line. And I think if you reinforce that and start thinking about, did this really matter? And start focusing on what is the world going to be like now that we're in this new normal. This is the way it's going to be. What we used to have is not going to be the way it's going to be in the future. It's going to be better. I tend to be very optimistic. And I think that if we take the time now and think about what can we learn and how will our culture adapt, we're going to be more productive. Yeah, it's going to be different, but it's going to be better.
I agree with that. I think Cathy makes some really great points there. There is going to be a way of changing the way that we're doing our work now and eliminating some of those busy jobs that we have people doing that really bottom line. And I think that we're going to see that play out as we move through this process and we get back to sort of, again, that workplace where everybody is side by side. But as we're still going through this process and we're still trying to figure out and navigate how we get through this and come out on the other side in one piece and actually better for it, perhaps. Are we making sure that we are keeping promises to those that we've made promises to while we're in this right now? We talked earlier about how we should be communicating and how we should be flexible in those kinds of things. But are we keeping those types of promises? So, for example, if you have said to us, one of your team members, take some time, readjust your schedule if you need to care for an elderly parent or a small child. Are we then turning around and sort of saying, yeah, at the end of the day, but I need that deadline done. I need that project done by that certain time. I mean, are you really walking the walk that you're saying to your teams? And I think it's important that we still focus on that and we do keep our promises, because that's going to reinforce that trust that we talked about earlier as well.
I don't know if you remember the movie Office Space, but I'd love to see them doing a remake of Office Space setting the time of COVID-19, where they're still asking for the TPS report every morning. And Cathy, any other thoughts from you?
Yeah.
I know we're just about at time, but.
Well, this is kind of important because, for the last several years, I have been going around and talking about leadership competencies of the future, right? And we talk about the need to be flexible, the need to be adaptive, the need to have agile development mindsets. And, people always say, well, how do I build that? And I can't do that. And it's really hard. And yet here we are. And guess what? Every single leader I have talked to has done it because they've had to. And guess what? It's not been easy, but it's been possible. And they're doing it. And they're doing it really, because out of necessity, they can do this. Every single person can do it when faced with a difficult situation. And so, when we're learning from all of this, and people say you need to change the culture, it is possible. So when I think about what can we learn, what's needed for the future, being willing to change and realizing that when you can, and when you want to, you can. When you have to, you must. And, so if I were leaving you with one thought today, take what you've learned from this and build upon it, because you can make better teams. You can make a better culture, and you can make a happier workforce just by thinking about what worked really well and how did we grow from it as an organization.
Great. Now, I don't know if you want that to count as your final thought or not, because you kind of mentioned it that way.
Yes.
In which case, Kerry, why don't we go over to you for final thoughts?
Yeah, I think Cathy's point is a strong one. I mean, it's making sure that, you understand that you can change and it can be a positive change. I think the piece that we need to connect with our business, though, is to ensure that the culture that we are cultivating now in this new normal is still aligns with the mission of the organization, and that we're still in alignment as a team, and that all that sort of flows together. So it can shift, certainly, and the dynamics of your team can shift. But making sure that we're still in alignment with what the overall goal and mission of the organization or the business is going to be important as well.
Absolutely true. So thank you both for joining us. I think we kept this one nice and tight and on point. Next week, we're going to shift focus again. We're going to be jumping to talking about trust, learning to delegate, empower, and verify. And as someone who, this is not necessarily my strongest skill, during the age of COVID-19, it's even more important than ever. So I'm looking forward to learning from two experts some ideas on how we can better empower our employees and delegate more responsibility. For those of you in the audience, thank you for joining us. I hope you're enjoying the series. We'd love to hear your comments, your thoughts. Feel free to leave a comment on our YouTube page or shoot an email to info@iasa.org. Or you can tweet at us at IASA Inc. or at DM Reffitt. That's D like Darin, M like Michael, REFFITT. And we look forward to seeing you next week when we discuss delegation. Thank you and have a wonderful week.